You probably found this video because you're into music production or synthesizers or studios in some fashion. And this is actually part 3 of my The Perfect Home Studio series, where I basically take you through a process where I change up my studio over and over again, and I talk about gear and I talk about what I got and what I want to get, and yeah, you know, the stuff that you're probably into as well. So in today's episode we are talking about Patchbays. Why should you get one? What are they good for? What kind of types of Patchbays are there? And this will be pretty beginner friendly, so if you already know a lot about Patchbays, you might want to skip a little bit in the video. So let's get to it. So what will I talk about and show you in this video? Well, firstly, I want to talk a little bit about why you should or should not get a Patchbay. And then we'll take a look at what a Patchbay is and how different configurations work, a pretty basic overview. And then I'll talk a little bit about the upgrades to my studio and show you my Patchbay setup. So there are a couple of things to consider before going and buying a Patchbay. Firstly, do you really need one? Do you have too much stuff that you want to connect or interconnect, which your mixer and your sound card doesn't let you do? Or do you have a lot of spare inputs and spare outputs on the sound card or mixer in a way that really makes a Patchbay just pretty unnecessary? That's something to think about. The second thing to consider is that when you add a Patchbay, you actually add more cables into the mix, which in turn can create more problems. So what's on the plus side? Well, I think it's really good to have Patchbays if you are moving stuff around. If you, for example, like me, want to switch out the main synths that you're using on a regular basis on your main table, and you don't want to, go around and, connect stuff on the back of your entire table, it's a really smooth way to just interconnect things. Which brings me into point kind of number 2 here on the plus side, is that it's really good for when you have a lot of outputs and inputs on the back of sound cards or mixers or other type of gear. It's kind of hard to access. That way the interface of a Patchbay becomes a really smooth way to just interconnect things more quickly. So that's a really big plus as well. Another big plus is, of course, more flexible mixer and FX routing. So for example, if you want more flexibility when routing effects to each other, routing a synth to an effect, to an input of a mixer, for example, in a flexible way that you might not be able to do very easily without a Patchbay, well, that's something you can do. I don't personally do it yet because I haven't set that up yet. I haven't really figured out what I want to do, but it's definitely something where a Patchbay can add a lot of flexibility. You can interchange in what order different effects, for example, come into play and which channels will actually feed into the effects. So that's something to consider as well. And the reason we're up to number 4 at the moment. I think a fourth good reason would be because you can actually split signals. We'll talk a little bit about that, but with certain Patchbay configurations, you can actually split the signals. So you have one signal going through the Patchbay into the sound card, and you take a feed from that signal and put it into a effects unit and maybe record it into another channel. So the way you can use a Patchbay to actually split signals, audio signals from a synth, for example, can be very beneficial. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So next up, let's talk Patchbay settings. So let's start by making sense of Patchbays. There are 3 configurations that are very common. They're called normalized, half normalized, and through. So the way a Patchbay works is that you have a top row with connectors both in the front and in the back. So these are the front connectors and these are the back connectors. And in the top row here, you have what we call outputs. And in the bottom row, we have inputs. That means that we have a basic principle here that audio, if it will flow from the top to the bottom, from outputs of gear into inputs of something. And an input here could be, for example, a sound card or something. So you have audio going in this direction and audio going in this direction. Now, depending on the type of normalization that you have on your Patchbay, you will have different interactions between the top row and the second bottom row. In a normalized configuration, the audio if you plug something in here, you plug a synth in here, the audio from this output will flow, and it will flow naturally to an input. And this is what makes it a little bit confusing, because of course you might say, well, isn't this connector here an output? Yeah, in a sense it's an output. It goes out of the Patchbay, but it goes to an input of a source. So it's kind of, you have to think of it in a reversed fashion, I suppose. So this input here is actually for an output, and this output here is actually for an input. So here you connect your, say, your little sound card. So with the normalized configuration, the audio here will flow down without you having any patch cables connected in the front. So these two connectors here will simply be empty. There's nothing going on here on the front of your Patchbay. But if you connect something either here or here, it will mean that you will break the connection between the top row and the bottom row. So whenever you connect something in the top or in the bottom on the front of the unit, you'll break the chain. The audio won't flow down uninterrupted. So this means that you could, for example, insert another synth into the bottom connector here to let it go to the sound card, or you could, for example, take the output of your synthesizer that you have connected over here and connect it to, say, a little handheld recorder that you have. So that's something that is possible to do in the normalized configuration. Now, what about half normalized? Well, half normalized is very similar, but what happens here is that it's possible to tap the signal. So what I can do here is I can take the audio that comes from a synth here, and I can tap the audio and send it to another source without breaking the chain that sends the audio to the sound card, for example, here. Now the through variation here, or the through mode or through setting, is quite different. It's basically just sending audio from, say, an output to an input, or an output here to an input here, and there's no connection. The audio won't flow naturally. You'll have to connect this cable into these connectors here in order to create a signal flow. The signal flow is horizontal here, but there's nothing going on the vertical line here. There's nothing sending between these inputs and outputs. And as I will talk a little bit about later on when I describe my setup, you'll see that sometimes having the normalized configuration is very good, and the half normalized of course has merits, but also having a through option is really nice as well. So hopefully this made it a little bit clearer. Now let's take a look at where I'm at with my studio. So in order to talk a bit about the Patchbay setup, I'm just going to remove some of the synths here. So here we have the sound card and Patchbay setup, as well as it's being flanked by the overhub from Electron that I use for my kind of main USB setup with the synths and these fancy Electron cables. So as you might have noticed, I still haven't labeled the Patchbays, and that's because this is kind of work in progress that I'm working on still. I still haven't figured out exactly how I want everything routed, and I guess that's why this video took a little while to make, because I felt like, yeah, I really haven't figured out how I want to use it. But basically what I got going on here is I use the Claret 8 Pre as my main interface, and there's the ADA 8200, I think it's called, from Behringer. It's an ADAT expansion, and I think it works pretty nicely. You could of course go with the Focusrite expansion, but I did find it a little bit too expensive for my needs, especially since I don't really use the mic pre's, and I do think the mic pre's are where the difference is at when it comes to these expansions. Patchbays can be half normalized, normalized, or through. Those are the kind of three main or most common configurations. Now these are the Neutrik or Neutrik Patchbays. They are fairly inexpensive, and let me be honest, if I would buy something else today, I would not buy these. The reason being that these Patchbays are half normalized from the get-go. So basically, in order to change that, you have to remove a panel and switch a card. Now of course that might not seem overly complicated, but in all honesty, having a switch on the front would give you a lot more versatility when it comes to these Patchbays, and it's something that I would really prefer than to having do like a manual swap, because really I'm kind of comfortable that way. And a good option for that would be the Samsung, I think they're called S Plus. I can show you a little image of them here, and they have a little switch that you can switch between different modes. So since these are half normalized, it means that the audio comes here from a synthesizer output and it goes in on the back into an input on the sound card. And I basically set it up so on the first Patchbay here I have inputs and outputs from the Claret, and on the second one here I basically have synthesizer outputs. So a couple of different synths, like the Mother 32 uses this cable here whenever I want to hook it up, goes to the back. It comes out here, I think this should be the one. Comes out here and goes to the input of the bearing here. Now one thing you might notice here is that I haven't routed the inputs of the audio card or the ADAT expansion here through the back, because that would mean that I had a lot of cables going around here in some fashion back into the Patchbay. It would make little sense since the inputs are already available on the front, so why would I? Basically instead I just have the synthesizers that are located on the shelves over there or on the stands. They are, you know, pulled into the Patchbay here. I have the sound coming here from a synth and I just plug it into whatever input I want to use. That also makes it so that it's very easy for me to just remove it and plug something else into that input whenever I want to, you know, bring a new synth onto the table or something like that. So that's a big benefit as well on having these inputs here on the front. And the same that goes for these two inputs. So basically I only have 6 inputs of the 8 possible on the Claret here, routed on the back here. So it's basically inputs 2 and 3, 4 and 5, 6 and 7. Wait, did I say that right? No, I said it wrong. So it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So those are the inputs I use here on the sound card. And of course the synths I have connected here, the Digitact, Octatrack and Rhythm, they flow directly, because everything is plugged in the back, flow directly to the inputs of the sound card. So outputs from the synths into the inputs of the sound card. And I have these two here available for mics, or if I just want to plug something in. So this gives me a great deal of flexibility when it comes to plugging stuff in on the fly. If I say I want to take a pocket operator, I just want to plug it in somewhere, I can go with either plugging it in over here on the Patchbay itself or just using these two. So it gives me a lot of flexibility. And as you can see here on my super nice little spreadsheet, maybe I should use Excel instead. This is really not my strong suit. Well, I also have outputs routed, and suddenly, of course, in the earlier configuration I had inputs here on the second row, inputs over here, and now I have the Claret connected to outputs, because of course outputs are in the top row. So from 11 to, I think, let's see here, 18, I have the stereo outputs, and that's because I want to be able to basically take sound from my system and plug it into other things. And also a very nifty thing is that I have outputs here from the sound card always routed to the inputs of the Digitact and the Octatracks. I use one stereo pair for the Octatrack and one for the Digitact, always routed here. That means that I can easily send stuff from, say, another synth in the setup or internal audio from the computer through the sound card into the Digitact or the Octatrack for resampling. So that's a very fun thing that I like to do. Now, of course, you have to turn off the monitoring on both devices, because otherwise you're in for a very nasty bit of feedback noise. But yeah, other than that, it works really nicely. So I did start off by saying that I would prefer something else than these Patchbays, and it's because when you have the half normalized situation, the audio always flows down unless you plug something into the second socket. So if I plug, say, a new synth into this, the second here, the input to a sound card here, it will cut. So another synth won't flow down to this input to the sound card. But sometimes you want to pull out a synth. Say you want to pull it out and you want to, you want to send it somewhere else. And if you take the audio from the top row here and send it to something else, you have a little bit of annoyance that you might have to mute the inputs here on the sound card, on the actual sound card, go in and mute them, or plug something in to cancel out, the flow of the audio. And that can be a little bit annoying. So sometimes I find myself really wanting like a normalized option. But also, I would love to have the through option, or the option where basically the audio just flows through and nothing is transmitted unless you actually patch it. That would be awesome as well. For example, for these two here on the number 10 and 11, I have the sound card flowing down into the Digitact, and I would rather have a patch cable here that I could simply use the sound card's output 1 and 2, or outputs, I guess it's outputs 3 and 4 actually, outputs 3 and 4 here, and they're always routed to the Digitact. But say I remove the Digitact and I want to send them somewhere else, or I have the Digitact connected and I just don't want them to flow because maybe I want to monitor something on the Digitact and I don't want to go into the software, then it would be really handy to just have the cables and remove the cables and the flow is removed, so the audio flow is stopped. That's a nifty function with having the settings switchable, and something I think you could really consider being a worthy investment, because of course having to think about these things in advance and having to swap things, and as you can see here, it's a little tight with space. It's a little bit annoying to remove stuff from this table here. So having that option on the faceplate here would be really nice. So something I can definitely recommend. And as you can see down here on the Octatrack here, it's basically connected here with stereo outs into the Patchbay and stereo inputs that comes from the Patchbay and receives audio from the sound card. So that's basically how I set it up. And as you can see here beneath the table, it does get kind of messy with all the individual cables, so that's why I really prefer using a snake. Now HOSA was kind enough to send me one, and of course I'm grateful, because that will mean less cable clutter. So I will actually be removing all the cabling from my beneath my desk and replacing it with one snake instead. That means that I don't have to tie up all these different cables beneath the table with zip ties. I can just tie one snake up, and will be easier to actually know what is what, and having it removed and whatnot. So I think that will be a great improvement to the cable management. So this was the third episode in my home studio series. The next episode I think will be about kind of acoustic treatment, or what you can do to improve the sound that is actually coming out of the speakers, and that will in turn help you to mix a little better. So I think we will devote an episode to that. But if you have other ideas that you want me to cover here on my home studio series, please just leave a comment down below and I'll get to them. So my name is Bo, and I run this little channel here called Bo Beats. We look at synthesizers and music production gear. I try to review stuff. I do series on stuff. And if you want to, you should subscribe, hit the like button, and consider becoming a patron, which is donating a small amount every month to keep the channel going, to help me out. It's basically so I can invest more time into this passion I have making these kind of semi-educational cringy videos. And you also get a little reward if you become a patron. You basically get access to a patron only forum over on simplysynth.com. It's a pretty serious forum, well built, a lot of interesting threads over there, so it's just an added bonus. So I just want to thank all the patrons for being there, supporting me over time. It's greatly appreciated. It makes it possible for me to devote the time to these videos, and so big thank you. And I hope everybody's having a pleasant day, and I'll talk to you later.